Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I moved to the mountains for peace. No neighbors, no rules, just the silence of pine trees and the freedom I built with my own hands. But 10 days in, a fake HOA president declared war on my land. Now it's not just home, it's a battlefield, and I don't back down. I moved into the foothills of the Sierra Nevada to start over. Just me, my tools, and 2.5 acres of quiet land that nobody could tell me how to live on. After the divorce, I'd had enough of people who thought they knew what was best for me. So when I found this property, outside city limits, off the grid, and, most importantly, outside any homeowners association, I didn't hesitate. I built the house myself, a compact, solar-powered cabin with a deep well, a small shed, and a wooden deck that looked out toward the ridgeline. The air smelled like pine and freedom. I thought I'd finally found peace. 10 days after I moved in, I came back from a supply run in town and found a sheet of paper taped to my front door. It was printed on official-looking letterhead with an HOA logo I'd never seen before, Pine Hollow Ranches Homeowners Association. The bold title read, "Cease occupation immediately. Unauthorized residency." Below that, a signature in neat cursive, Karen Spicer, HOA President. For a second, I just stared at it, trying to process what I was reading. Unauthorized residency? I owned this land. I had the deed, the permit, the county's approval for every nail and pipe. The paper listed violations that made no sense. Unapproved construction, non-compliant fencing, livestock activity. I didn't even own a dog yet, and a deadline to vacate the property within 72 hours. I laughed out loud, assuming it was some sort of prank. Maybe the HOA next door got my address wrong. My land bordered their cookie-cutter development, rows of beige houses all ruled by an iron fist of lawn regulations. I'd seen their signs while passing through, maintaining community standards since 1998. Standards apparently included policing your neighbor's flower beds. Still, just to be safe, I double-checked. I pulled up the county GIS system on my laptop, overlaid parcel maps, and confirmed exactly what I already knew. My lot number wasn't anywhere near the HOA's boundary lines. It was listed under unincorporated private property. Legally speaking, I was as free as it gets. The next morning, I decided to call the number listed on the letter. A woman answered in a clipped, rehearsed tone. Pine Hollow Ranches HOA office. "This is Karen speaking." "Hi, Karen," I said, forcing a polite tone. "This is Travis Larson. I think there's been a mix-up. I received some kind of notice about my property being in violation of HOA rules, but I'm not a member of your HOA." There was a pause, long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then came the voice again, now sharp and patronizing. "Mr. Larson, all residents within Pine Hollow Ranch's boundaries are subject to HOA oversight. There are no exceptions." "Well, that's the problem," I said. "My property isn't within your boundaries. It's outside the HOA map, confirmed by the county." She made a sound halfway between a sigh and a laugh. "Sir, I have the map right in front of me, and your parcel is clearly within our jurisdiction. You'll need to submit your plans for review and stop all unapproved work immediately." "Karen," I said, my patience thinning, "I built this house legally, with permits. The HOA doesn't govern this land. You're mistaken." "Mr. Larson," she replied, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "you can either comply voluntarily or face enforcement action. I'd advise you to choose wisely." Then she hung up. I stood there for a minute, staring at the phone in disbelief. I dealt with bureaucrats before, but this was a new level of delusion. I figured she'd realize her mistake soon enough. The next day, a silver SUV rolled up my driveway. A man in khakis and mirrored sunglasses stepped out, holding a clipboard. "You Travis Larson?" he asked, as if expecting me to deny it. "Depends who's asking." "HOA compliance officer," he said, flashing a plastic badge that looked like it came from an inkjet printer. "You've been issued a formal notice of violation. You're required to cease construction, remove the unapproved outbuilding, and vacate the premises within 48 hours. I raised an eyebrow. "You do realize this isn't part of Pine Hollow Ranches, right?" He didn't answer. Instead, he handed me a manila envelope and turned on his heel. Inside were photos of my house, taken from the road, and a printed violation report. It was surreal, like someone had decided to cosplay as a government agency. By now, I wasn't laughing. This was trespassing territory. I sent a certified letter to the HOA office stating that my property was not within their jurisdiction and that any further interference would be reported to law enforcement. Apparently, Karen didn't appreciate that. The following morning, just as the fog began to lift from the valley, I heard voices outside. I opened the door to see Karen herself standing at the edge of my driveway, flanked by two men who looked like they'd been dragged away from their golf game. She was in a blazer and oversized sunglasses, holding a thick folder like it was a holy text. "Mr. Larson," she began, "you are unlawfully occupying property that falls under the governance of Pine Hollow Ranches HOA. You need to vacate the premises immediately, or we will be forced to escalate." I stepped off the porch. "Karen, you're trespassing on private property. This isn't HOA land." She waved her hand dismissively. "That's not for you to decide. Our board voted to extend our jurisdiction last quarter. You're in violation." "Pretty sure that's not how property law works," I said. Her expression hardened. "Then I'll let the sheriff explain it to you. I'm calling him right now." She pulled out her phone and started dialing. I stood there, watching her, the absurdity of it all sinking in. I hadn't even been here 2 weeks, and somehow I was already the villain in an HOA melodrama I never signed up for. As she talked to dispatch, I glanced toward the hills, the same view that had convinced me to buy this place. I'd chosen solitude and freedom. Instead, I'd gotten Karen. The sheriff's cruiser showed up about 20 minutes later, tires crunching over my gravel driveway like they were chewing on the tension in the air. Karen was already standing front and center, arms folded, one foot tapping with the smug anticipation of a homeowner ready to sick the law on the neighborhood raccoon. Her two goons flanked her like discount bodyguards, whispering to each other and throwing glances at my solar array like it personally offended them. The deputy stepped out, sunglasses on, one hand resting casually on his belt. He was older, maybe early 50s, with the look of someone who had seen every version of neighborly insanity you could imagine. His name tag read Deputy C. Myers. Karen immediately launched into her monologue, speaking with the sharp cadence of someone who practiced confrontation in front of a mirror. "Officer, thank you for coming. This man," she pointed dramatically in my direction, "is occupying a parcel under HOA governance without approval. He's constructed multiple structures without submitting for review. He's refused repeated compliance notices, and now we're escalating per our bylaws." Myers raised a brow, looked at me, then at my house, then back to Karen. "You said he's on HOA property?" "Yes," she said confidently. "Our HOA passed Jurisdictional Expansion Resolution 1192 last quarter. His land is now within our regulatory boundary." I couldn't help it. I snorted, loudly. "That's not how jurisdiction works. You can't just vote to annex private land like you're a feudal baron." Myers held up a hand, sighing. "Let's take this one step at a time. Sir, can I see your ID and any documents you have proving ownership?" "Gladly," I said, already reaching into the folder I'd prepared the moment she'd threatened to call the cops. I handed over my driver's license, property deed, county zoning map, and a notarized letter from the county land office confirming that my lot, Parcel 376, was not and had never been within Pine Hollow Ranches or any other HOA boundary. For good measure, I included a printed aerial overlay I'd exported from the county GIS database. Myers stepped aside to review everything in peace, flipping through the pages with practiced speed. Karen, in the meantime, kept throwing anxious glances toward the folder like it might spontaneously combust. He returned after a few minutes and exhaled in that long, exhausted way cops do when they're stuck playing babysitter to adult toddlers. "Well," he said slowly, "Mr. Larson's documents check out. His parcel isn't in Pine Hollow Ranch's jurisdiction. There's no legal mechanism for an HOA to forcibly expand into unincorporated land. That would require county approval, rezoning hearings, and a hell of a lot more paperwork than what I'm seeing here." Karen's smile had vanished. "But we voted." "Ma'am," Myers cut her off, "you can't vote to control land that doesn't belong to you." "But he's living here without approval." "He owns the land," Myers said flatly. "He doesn't need your approval." Karen's jaw clenched so tight I thought she might crack a molar. Her goons stood behind her, visibly deflating like discount pool toys left in the sun. Myers turned back to me. "Mr. Larson, just for the record, you said this woman and her associates came onto your land without permission." I nodded. "Twice now, today and yesterday. I've got security footage of both incidents." He sighed. "In that case, I'll be issuing a formal warning for trespass. Ma'am, you and your companions need to vacate the property immediately and refrain from further contact unless through legal channels." "You're siding with him," Karen hissed. "I'm siding with the law, ma'am," he said. "Now, step off this property." She opened her mouth to argue but caught the look in his eyes and wisely turned on her heel. Her bodyguards followed, one of them muttering something about hippie homesteaders under his breath. Myers lingered for a moment. "Sorry about all this. Some folks let a little power go to their heads." I nodded. "Appreciate you coming out. I knew this land was outside the HOA, but I figured she'd escalate." "Keep those cameras running," he said. "And if she comes back, don't hesitate to call again." I watched them drive off, dust rising behind their tires like smoke from a dying fire, but I knew better than to assume it was over. Karen hadn't been just mistaken. She'd been certain. And people like that don't walk away quietly. They double down. I spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing footage from my perimeter cams, making sure every minute of her presence was documented. Then I backed it all up to 3 different drives and uploaded it to the cloud, just in case. That night, I cracked a beer and stood on my deck, staring out at the pine trees that marked the edge of my property, the same trees that made me fall in love with the place in the first place. I built this life deliberately, carefully, with my own hands and money. I didn't ask for neighbors, and I sure as hell didn't ask for a self-appointed overlord with a Xeroxed badge. I took another sip, then locked all the gates, flicked on the motion sensors, and went inside. Somehow, I knew Karen Spicer wasn't done with me yet. 4 days later, I stepped outside with my morning coffee and immediately knew something was wrong. The first clue was the angle of the sunlight. Or more accurately, the angle of the sunlight bouncing off a pile of ripped gravel that used to be my driveway. Where there had once been a smooth, compacted access path from the county road to my front gate, now lay deep gouges, overturned stones, and the unmistakable mark of heavy tire tracks. Someone had deliberately torn it up overnight. I walked the perimeter, scanning for more surprises. Sure enough, painted crudely in red spray paint on my eastern fence line were the words, "Illegal squatter. Cho will remove you." Subtlety was apparently not part of the HOA's bylaws. My first thought was, what kind of lunatic escalates from angry letters to sabotage in under a week? My second thought was, this wasn't just Karen acting alone anymore. Someone helped her do this. I checked the security footage from the motion-activated cams I'd installed just after our last encounter. The image was grainy due to early morning fog, but I caught glimpses. A truck around 3 a.m., 2 figures in hoodies with gloves carrying shovels, and one of them stopping to take a selfie in front of the graffiti. I isolated the plates and downloaded everything. By 9 a.m., I was already en route to the sheriff's department. While I waited for the deputy to take my statement, I noticed the receptionist giving me a strange look. Not the usual mountain man off the grid kind of look. More like suspicion. She asked for my address again. Then she glanced at her monitor, hesitated, and said, "Are you the guy from Pine Hollow Ranches that HOA reported last week? The unauthorized structure case?" I blinked. "No, I'm not in Pine Hollow Ranches. That's kind of the point." She tilted her head. "Huh, weird. They filed a zoning complaint against your parcel with the land committee yesterday." That's when my stomach dropped. After logging the vandalism report and giving them the footage, I drove straight to the county zoning office. The woman behind the counter there, older with cat-eye glasses and a voice like dry leaves, pulled up the file and handed it over. Karen had submitted a formal petition to have my parcel reviewed, claiming it had been erroneously excluded from Pine Hollow Ranches during its expansion. According to her, my lot was always intended to be part of the HOA, and the previous mapping error needed correction to protect community integrity. She attached a blurry, unscaled map with my parcel crudely boxed in red ink and labeled HOA. Boundary correction. It looked like something a third grader would doodle during detention. It was pure fiction, but it had still triggered a bureaucratic review. This wasn't just about intimidation anymore. Karen was trying to lay legal groundwork for backdoor annexation. I left the county office with my heart thudding. I was angry, yes, but more than that, I was calculating. Karen had escalated from verbal threats to systemic sabotage. Now it was time to push back. That night, I called in a favor from a buddy I knew from my cartography work, Tim Chen, who worked as a GIS specialist for a private firm that handled mapping contracts for multiple counties. I explained what was going on. Tim didn't even hesitate. The next morning, he sent me a package with layered digital parcel maps, zoning records from the last 15 years, and certified historical aerial overlays of the area dating back to the HOA's founding. Every one of them confirmed the same thing. My parcel was never part of the HOA, not by geography, not by vote, not by law. Using my drone and high-resolution GPS, I created a side-by-side comparison. Actual legal HOA boundary versus the map Karen had submitted. I annotated everything, printed copies, and formatted a PDF report titled Fraudulent Boundary Claim by HOA President Evidence File. I didn't stop there. I posted it anonymously to the local neighborhood forum that Pine Hollow Ranch's residents used for complaints, dog-sitting offers, and thinly veiled gossip. By the next morning, the post had over 80 comments. The responses were exactly what I hoped for. Confused homeowners asking why their HOA dues had increased. One guy mentioning he'd received a compliance notice, even though his house backed onto a national forest. And at least 3 people wondering how HOA lines had suddenly grown. Then someone, user Ranch Ownert, dropped a bombshell, a photo of a handwritten note Karen had slipped under their door 2 months ago, demanding a retroactive community maintenance contribution of $600. They'd paid it, thinking it was real. I sent them a private message. We arranged a call. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, papers spread out like a battle map, phone to my ear, and realized this wasn't just about me anymore. Karen had a pattern, a quiet campaign of intimidation, expansion, and unofficial taxation, targeting anyone who lived near the HOA but wasn't part of it. Well, not anymore. 3 days after the forum post, I realized something had changed. Not just on my property, though the driveway had been regraded by a contractor I hired using emergency funds, and I'd added 2 new floodlights with motion tracking, but in the neighborhood itself. People were talking, whispering, watching. At the hardware store, the usual awkward nods turned into flat stares. A clerk I'd spoken with twice before wouldn't meet my eyes. And when I paid for a coil of barbed wire and a new fence post driver, the cashier murmured, "You really think you're going to win against them?" I asked, "Them who?" But she only shook her head like it wasn't safe to answer. That night, as I reviewed new footage from the trail cams, I saw someone had left new flyers on my gate and mailbox. Printed, not handwritten this time. Slick paper, HOA logo front and center. Notice to residents, unauthorized construction and unlawful land occupation at Parcel 376 continues in defiance of Pine Hollow Ranch's guidelines. This activity jeopardizes community values and may affect adjacent property assessments. Residents are encouraged to report further violations. Encouraged. That word sat in my throat like a nail. The next morning, I woke to find that my mailbox had been zip-tied shut, the lock jammed with epoxy, and a handwritten sticker slapped on the front. Mail forwarding in effect. HOA collections. I drove straight to the post office, paperwork in hand, and explained the situation. The supervisor checked their system, browsed a few entries, and narrowed her eyes. "Someone submitted a change of address for you last week," she said. "Had your mail forwarded to the Pine Hollow HOA P.O. box." I blinked. "They're not me." "That's fraud." She nodded. "We'll flag it and restore delivery, but if someone did this intentionally, you should file a federal complaint. That's a felony." I added that to the list. Back at home, I found 2 more flyers pinned to my fence. Same phrasing, this time with a QR code linking to a community petition to resolve unauthorized use of HOA land. Over 100 signatures, most of them names I didn't recognize, except one. Mark Halverson. I'd worked with Mark on a GIS zoning project 4 years ago. He'd moved out here recently, I remembered. I gave him a call. "Mark," I asked, "why'd you sign that petition?" He paused. "I didn't. I sent him the screenshot." A few minutes later, he texted me back. "That's not even my handwriting. That's not my address either." WTF is this? We were staring at the beginnings of a deeper fraud, forged community pressure, fake petitions, maybe even falsified signatures. My lawyer, Alexis, land dispute specialist and fully in the loop now, said it was a textbook case of coercive HOA overreach and reputational interference. "If we can prove intent and pattern," she said, "we can turn this into a multi-claim civil suit." Good, because by now I wasn't just defending my land. I was going to burn their little empire to the ground. legally. That same day, I used my drone to conduct a low-altitude survey of the HOA perimeter, documenting every fence, every posted sign, and every inch of territory. I created a time-stamped overlay and published a short, digestible report online. Then I added every fake flyer, forged petition snippet, and post office complaint to a shared Google Drive marked Pine Hollow HOA Harassment Dossier. It was public. It was detailed. And I shared it with every single homeowner who'd messaged me since the forum post. The next morning, I woke up to over 20 new emails. 3 of them came from current residents of Pine Hollow ranches. One of them, a woman named Hannah, wrote, "Karen's been sending similar notices to my elderly parents for months. They paid her $1,000 in compliance fines and never got receipts. They didn't know any better." I think she's been scaring other folks too. That night, I sat down and wrote a formal complaint addressed to the district attorney's office, not just about me, about all of it. The fake notices, the forged maps, the fraudulent mail, the intimidation, the lies. The next morning, I submitted the complaint in person. On my way out of the county building, I passed a man in a blue blazer I didn't recognize. He stopped, glanced at me, and asked, "You Travis Larson?" I nodded cautiously. "I represent a few property owners in Pine Hollow," he said quietly. "What you're doing, keep doing it. You've got people behind you. They're just afraid to speak up." Then he walked away without giving a name. By the time I got home, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just a petty feud anymore. This was a pattern of systemic abuse, and Karen Spicer had built it brick by forged brick. And I was going to tear it down, inch by documented inch. It was just after dawn when I found the gate open. I knew I'd latched it the night before. I always did, especially now. A new padlock had been installed just 2 days ago, but that morning it hung useless from the chain, cut clean through. I followed the dirt path down to the edge of my property, boots crunching through gravel still damp from last night's fog. That's where I found the footprints, 3 distinct pairs. One set heavy and deep, another narrow with sharp heel strikes, and a third light. Maybe a teenager. They'd trampled my irrigation line and left behind a used pair of gloves and an empty coffee cup with the HOA logo on it. I didn't even need to guess who sent them. I checked the cameras immediately. At 2:53 in the morning, my motion system had triggered. The footage was grainy in the dark, but unmistakable. Karen flanked by 2 men walking right up to the property line and stepping over it like it was imaginary. One of them carried bolt cutters. The other had a stack of papers. They tacked one of those papers to my porch rail with painter's tape. I walked back and tore it down. It read, "Final notice. Squatter removal pending. HOA approved resolution begins within 72 hours. No letterhead. No legal citation. Just intimidation." I emailed the footage to Alexis immediately. Her response came in 5 minutes. "This is gold. We'll add criminal trespass to the pile. Also, call the sheriff now." So I did. The deputy who showed up was a new face, younger, quieter, but he took the report seriously. I handed him the video on a flash drive, the paper notice, and the items they left behind. He nodded. "We've had 2 other complaints this week about HOA overreach from that group. You're not alone." That was the first real relief I'd felt in days. Later that afternoon, I drove to the county zoning office. I had an appointment to view the original subdivision plat and a record of the boundary filings. I needed to make sure, legally and spatially, that I was in the right. The clerk, a woman named Trina, pulled up the original 1987 Pine Hollow Ranches map, scanned into the county system. Then she pulled up the amended version from 2003 and another from 2015, all consistent, all showing my parcel clearly outside the shaded HOA boundary. But when I asked to see recent HOA filings, she hesitated. There was a submission 2 months ago, she said, requesting boundary modification. Rejected. No public vote. No legal survey attached. And, she scrolled down, it's signed by Karen Spicer. So she tried to expand the HOA and failed. Exactly. But here's the thing. Someone resubmitted a near-identical packet 2 weeks later. New name. Different formatting. But same language. She turned the screen. It was submitted under the name Pine Hollow Development Consortium. No such entity existed. I copied everything. Trina printed and notarized it for me on the spot. That night, I updated the digital dossier and uploaded the new documents. The next day, I filed a formal complaint to the State Department of Consumer Affairs under HOA regulatory abuse, citing falsified filings, harassment campaigns, trespassing, and unauthorized enforcement actions on private land. Alexis, meanwhile, was working with a land rights specialist to prepare an injunction request. While we built our case, I noticed something shift online. My public thread, the one exposing Karen's tactics, had gone viral on the local homeowner forums. A user named Retired Rancher 77 posted, "She did this to us 10 years ago. Said we owed 6 months of fees even though we weren't part of the association. We paid just to get her off our backs. Still have the fake invoice." Another posted photos of the same flyers I'd received, left on cabins, trailers, even a church that sat just outside HOA lines. Same threats, same language. It wasn't just me anymore. Karen had run this racket for years, and I was the first one stubborn enough to push back with legal teeth. But she wasn't done yet. That evening, as I reviewed the latest trail cam footage, I noticed a red laser flicker across the trees behind my shed. Someone was scouting, watching, targeting, and it wasn't for birds. I shut the laptop and made 3 calls that night. First to Alexis, second to the sheriff's office, requesting a formal security patrol and incident report, and third to my old colleague Jonah, who owed me a favor and just happened to install forensic-grade surveillance systems for state agencies. "Time to go full perimeter," I told him. "I want night vision, motion sensors, facial capture, the works." If Karen thought she could intimidate me off my own land, she was about to learn what a cartographer could do when he mapped the battlefield. The sun hadn't fully risen when Jonah showed up in his beat-up Tacoma, bed-packed with enough surveillance gear to outfit a wildlife reserve. He barely said hello before unloading a box of trail cams, motion-triggered floodlights, and a portable drone nest disguised as a birdhouse. This wasn't some Amazon-grade gear. This was law enforcement surplus, borderline military. We worked in silence for most of the morning, rigging the perimeter of the property, cameras at every gate, under every tree line, one hidden in a fake rock by the mailbox. The drone system was the real crown jewel, motion-sensitive, programmed to launch and orbit the house automatically if anything tripped the fence line sensors. "You expecting a war?" Jonah asked as we wired the 3rd solar battery pack into a cedar post. "No," I said, "but it looks like one already started." By that afternoon, the system was live, and not a moment too soon. Around 6:30, the drone's feed activated. I was inside eating when my phone buzzed with an alert. "Perimeter breach, northeast fence." I tapped into the feed and saw them, 2 men I'd never seen before, pacing along the edge of my property with clipboards, muttering and pointing toward my solar array. One of them had a branded polo that read Pine Hollow Compliance. I stepped outside with my phone recording. "Hey," I called, "you're on private property. You need to leave." One of them, shorter, round face, crew cut, smiled like a used car salesman. "We're with Pine Hollow's compliance inspection team, just assessing setback violations. You'll get the notice in writing." "I'm not under your HOA." He waved dismissively. "That's being clarified. There's a redistricting effort pending." I didn't argue. I just held up my phone and pointed to the private property sign 3 feet from his leg. "Trespassing," I said flatly. That shut them up. They turned and left, but not before I caught a full face shot for the footage. Later that evening, I logged the video and forwarded it to Alexis. Her response was immediate. "They're doubling down. We move now." The next morning, we filed for a temporary restraining order against Karen Spicer, citing criminal trespass, harassment, attempted fraudulent claims of authority, obstruction of peaceful enjoyment of private property. Alexis also sent a cease and desist letter to the Pine Hollow HOA board and demanded an internal audit of Karen's actions. We sent copies to the county clerk, the sheriff's office, and the California Department of Real Estate. Karen's name was about to become radioactive, but of course Karen didn't go quietly. Within 48 hours, the town bulletin board, the physical one at the gas station, had a new flyer pinned in bold red letters. "Warning, unauthorized structures on Lot 73, code violations pending." Lot 73 was my parcel. She wasn't just going after me legally. She was trying to publicly smear me as a violator, as if I were the one cutting corners or squatting. That's when I realized this wasn't just about borders or bylaws. Karen was running a narrative war. But she made a fatal mistake, because while she was printing lies on colored paper, I was printing topographic overlays and parcel boundary data, fully certified and backed by county records. I'd even dug up satellite imagery from 2 years ago, showing my land before and after construction, clear evidence of responsible permitted development, no violations, no ambiguity. We compiled everything into a formal counteroffensive packet, notarized survey maps, timestamps from the drone footage, screen captures of her forged documents, and testimonies from 2 neighbors who admitted Karen had coerced them into paying membership dues despite living outside the HOA. Then came the big play. Alexis filed a civil suit not just against Karen, but against the Pine Hollow HOA board itself, citing negligent oversight, enabling misconduct, and civil conspiracy. She added a damages estimate of $330,000 for harassment, legal costs, slander, and lost use of property. That number had some bite. By now, the story had reached the local news blog. An article went live titled, "The HOA That Went Too Far. Local Man Fights Back Against Overreach." Comments flooded in, stories like mine, names, addresses, HOA horror tales going back a decade. People were waking up. This wasn't an isolated incident. Karen predictably started unraveling. According to a tip from a Pine Hollow resident, she called an emergency board meeting and screamed at the others that they were supposed to back her up. But the board was nervous. Their emails were subpoenaed. Their minutes were under review. Their personal names were now on a lawsuit. By the end of the week, 2 members of the board resigned. And just when I thought Karen might finally go quiet, I found a rock through my front window, wrapped in another flyer. "Get out. This isn't over." No signature, but I knew her handwriting by now. I handed the rock and paper to the sheriff the next morning. He didn't smile when he said, "We'll be pursuing this further." And I didn't smile either when I turned and said, "So will I." The rock didn't just crack glass, it cracked any illusion that Karen still operated within a system of rules. After that night, I changed the tone. No more waiting, no more hoping someone else would handle it. I was going to bury her, legally, procedurally, and with every recorded second of her harassment. First, I uploaded the footage of the rock incident to a cloud repository, labeled, time-stamped, with a note for my attorney. Use if she tries to spin this. Then I filed a police report, which now included repeated trespassing, verbal threats, false documents, mail tampering, public defamation, and now property damage with implied threat. Sheriff's deputies came by again. This time, no eye rolls, no polite neutral stance. They took pictures, asked real questions, and one even muttered, "I don't know why she's still walking around free." It was starting to register. Even the sheriff's office could no longer ignore it. She wasn't just a pushy HOA president anymore. She was a liability. Alexis took it further. She contacted the California Department of Justice and submitted a formal complaint against Karen for attempted land fraud, supported by the drone footage, forged boundary flyers, and the false filings Karen had submitted to the Land Use Commission. And to make it even more airtight, we included GPS-tagged images of my boundary markers and a signed affidavit from the original land surveyor, confirming, again, that my parcel had never been under Pine Hollow HOA. Then came the wild card I didn't expect. The whistleblower. An anonymous email landed in Alexis's inbox. It was a scanned internal memo from Pine Hollow's last annual board review. The document showed that Karen had unilaterally added my parcel and 4 others to a proposed HOA expansion zone without formal vote or approval. It included a forged unanimous consent sheet bearing signatures of board members, 2 of whom had already resigned and now swore they never signed anything. Boom. We submitted this as Exhibit A in the pending lawsuit. Alexis's motion to amend our complaint now included fraudulent misrepresentation, forgery, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. That got the judge's attention. A hearing was scheduled for 42 days out, but until then, the court granted us a protective injunction. Karen was legally barred from setting foot on my property or contacting me in any form. Violation meant immediate arrest. It should have ended there. But not for Karen. 3 days later, I woke up to find my driveway blocked by a freshly dumped pile of gravel. Not just dirt, contractor-grade gravel, 6 feet wide and knee-deep, dumped right across the access road. No truck tracks, no tire marks. Someone had backed in, dropped it, and fled. There was a note sticking out from the pile. Private road maintenance by HOA. Stay off our land. It wasn't even subtle anymore. I filed another report. Sheriff's deputies came, took pictures, and stood there shaking their heads. "You got enemies," one said. I didn't reply. Instead, I called in a favor. One of my old friends, Marcus, used to run infrastructure logistics for wildfire teams. He showed up with a front loader and a hell of an attitude. In 2 hours, my driveway was cleared, regraded, and fitted with a steel barrier gate and a new keypad lock welded into place. Meanwhile, Alexis filed a contempt of court motion. This time, it wasn't civil. This was criminal obstruction, violation of a protective injunction, and malicious tampering with access to one's primary residence. She also filed a subpoena for HOA budget records to prove Karen used HOA funds to hire contractors for her vendetta. Then, it happened. Karen was arrested. Not a polite citation, not a visit. Arrested, cuffed on her own porch. Apparently, she tried to intercept the county clerk at home to explain the land discrepancy in person and ended up yelling about conspiracies and voter fraud. The clerk's husband was a retired cop. He called it in as a threat. It was over. Or so I thought, because just 2 nights after the arrest, someone slashed the tires on Jonah's truck while it was parked on my property. That crossed another line, so I did what I should have done a long time ago. I installed live perimeter surveillance with night vision, motion-activated alarms, and direct link to Sheriff's Dispatch. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was documenting every second. The story had gone from a land dispute to full-on psychological warfare, but I still had one more weapon: public pressure. I uploaded a full report. Documents, video, drone footage, all names censored except Karen's, to the local neighborhood watchdog page, not Facebook. The one that mattered, the county forum where ranchers, contractors, and people who actually vote hang out. The post went viral, and the comments. Let's just say Karen wasn't popular. By the end of the week, someone started a petition. Remove Karen Spicer as president of Pine Hollow HOA. Hundreds of signatures rolled in. People she'd threatened, people she'd lied to. People like me. The dam had cracked, and the flood was coming. Karen's arrest wasn't the end. 2 nights later, Jonah's truck tires were slashed on my property. That was it. I installed motion-activated cameras, floodlights, and linked the system directly to the sheriff's office. No more waiting. No more chances. Then came the hearing. Karen showed up in a wrinkled blazer, looking like a PTA mom on trial. Our lawyer, Alexis, shredded her. She presented drone maps, notarized boundaries, the fake HOA expansion memo, witness affidavits, video of Karen trespassing, even the rock-throwing incident. The judge didn't blink. Verdict: Karen acted beyond her legal capacity, committed fraud, and used HOA funds to harass non-members. The court dissolved Pine Hollow HOA's expansion, ordered them to pay me $330,000, and stripped Karen of her real estate license. I rebuilt my driveway, posted a new sign. Private property not under HOA control. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Underneath it, "Hey Karen, or stay gone."